If you had walked into my kitchen that morning, you would have thought nothing had changed, but I had already lost everything. I'm 90 years old now. I've had time to outlive most things, habits, neighbors, even the sound of my own house when it was full. But I never expected to outlive being needed. My name doesn't matter much. At my age, names fade from other people's memory before they fade from your own. But I was a mother. That part stays. I had one daughter. Just one. Raised her in a small house outside Nashville. Her father worked long shifts, and I kept everything else together. Meals on the table, clothes clean, homework checked under a dim kitchen light. We didn't have much, but we had rhythm. And rhythm, I learned, is what makes a life feel whole. She used to sit at that same table, swinging her legs, asking questions that didn't have answers yet. "Mama, what happens when people get old?" I'd laugh back then. Said something simple. Said, "You slow down, but you don't stop." I believed that. Years passed the way they do, quietly at first, then all at once. She grew up, left for college, came back different. Not wrong, just carrying a world I didn't quite understand anymore. That's the way of it. Children don't leave all at once. They leave in pieces. First, it's their time, then their attention. Then one day, it's their presence. I didn't notice when it started happening. That's the truth. Life doesn't send you a letter saying, "This is the moment things change." It just shifts. She got busy. Work, friends, her own life. I told myself that was good. That's what you raise them for, to go out and live. And I meant it. But meaning something and living with it, those are two different things. There's a kind of silence that settles into a house when someone stops coming back the way they used to. It's not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It just stays longer each day. I'd still set 2 cups out sometimes. Habit is a stubborn thing. Then I'd catch myself, put one back. Now, I'm not a foolish woman. I lived through enough years to understand that children don't owe you their whole lives. That's not how it works. You give forward, not backward. But I will tell you something honest, something I didn't understand until I got old, being alone and being left alone. Those are not the same thing. One is life. The other feels like a question you don't know how to answer. And the day she told me she was leaving for good, not just moving, but building a life that didn't have space for me in it the way it used to, well, that's when I realized something had already been happening long before that moment. I just hadn't been ready to see it. She didn't say it in a cruel way. That's what made it harder. If she had shouted, slammed a door, blamed me for something, I could have held on to that. Anger gives you something to grip. But she sat across from me, calm, careful, like she was choosing each word so it wouldn't break me. And somehow, that made it break deeper. She said, "Mama, I think it's time I live my life fully, on my own." Now, you'd think a woman my age would be prepared for that sentence. 90 years gives you time to rehearse loss. I'd buried a husband. I'd said goodbye to friends one by one. I'd watched a whole generation disappear like lights going out down a long street. But nothing prepares you for your child choosing a life that no longer circles back to you. I nodded. Of course I did. I've always been the kind of woman who nods first, feels later. I said, "You should, honey. That's what you're supposed to do." And I meant that too. But here's the part nobody tells you. Sometimes you can understand something completely and still not be ready to live with it. After she left that day, I stood in the doorway longer than I needed to. Not because I thought she'd come back right away, but because some part of me wasn't ready to close it. Doors, they become important when you get old. They mark the difference between before and after. That evening, the house felt different. Not empty. No, empty is simple. Empty is just space without things. This was something else. It was a house full of memories that didn't have a place to land anymore. I walked into the kitchen, ran my hand along the table where she used to sit. Same table, same scratches, same sunlight coming through the window at that late afternoon angle. Only difference was no one was there to notice it with me. I made myself dinner. Same way I had for years. Simple things. Nothing fancy. You learn over time that meals aren't about food. They're about who you're sharing them with. And eating alone, well, it teaches you things you didn't ask to learn. You choose slower. You listen more. Not to voices, but to the quiet. The hum of the refrigerator. The clock ticking like it's got somewhere to be. That night, I sat in my chair by the window. That chair's been mine for, must be 40 years now. My husband used to joke that it had my shape in it. Said if anyone else sat there, it would feel wrong. Funny the things that stay, and the people who don't. I thought about calling her, just to hear her voice. Not for anything important, just to say something small. Did you eat? Or it's getting cold out. But I didn't. There's a line you start to see when you get older. A line between holding on and holding someone back. And I never wanted to be the reason she felt pulled backward. So I sat there instead. And I realized something that took me a long time to put into words. When you're young, you think love means staying close. When you're old, you learn that sometimes love means stepping back so quietly, no one hears you do it. That was the night I stopped expecting her footsteps in the hallway. Not because I didn't want them, but because I finally understood they belong somewhere else now. Days have a way of settling into each other when there's no one interrupting them. Morning, coffee, same cup, same chair. I still woke up early, just like I always had. Your body keeps its promises long after life changes the rules. I'd open the curtains, let that Tennessee light come in soft and slow, dust floating in it like it had nowhere else to be. Funny, I used to clean that dust away every day. Now I let it sit a little longer. Gives the room something to move. I told myself I was fine. And in many ways, I was. I could still walk, still cook, still remember every birthday, every recipe, every story that mattered. I wasn't helpless, not even close. But there's a difference between being capable and being seen. And that difference, it grows. I started talking out loud more. Not in a way that would worry anyone, just little things. Don't forget the stove. That's enough salt. Things I used to say to her, now said to the air. At first, I caught myself doing it. Then I stopped catching myself. There's a truth I learned late in life, and I wish someone had told me sooner. A quiet house doesn't stay quiet. Your mind fills it. One afternoon, I went up to her old room. I hadn't done that in. I don't know how long. Not really. I'd pass by, maybe glance in. But this time I stepped inside. Everything was mostly the same. Bed made. Closet half empty. A few things she left behind like markers, proof that she had been there once. I sat on the edge of that bed, ran my hand across the blanket, and for a moment, I could hear her again. Not real, not exactly. But memory has a way of sounding just close enough to truth that it can fool your heart. I remembered brushing her hair before school. She hated when I pulled too hard. Said, "Mama, be gentle." I remembered waiting up when she was late as a teenager, pretending I wasn't worried, then scolding her just enough to hide it. I remembered the first time she didn't need me to fix something. That one stays with you. Because that's when the shift happens. Not when they leave the house, but when they stop reaching for your hands. I sat there longer than I meant to. And I'll tell you something honest, that was the first day I felt, not just alone, but unnecessary. Now that's a dangerous feeling. More dangerous than people think. I've seen it happen. Friends of mine, good, strong women, once they started believing they weren't needed anymore, they began to disappear in small ways. Skipping meals, sitting longer, talking less. Not because their bodies failed them, but because their reason to get up quietly slipped away. I remembered a story I once heard about a woman who stopped walking after her husband died. Not because she couldn't, but because she didn't see the point anymore. And little by little, her legs forgot what they were made for. That stayed with me, because I could feel that same pull, not in my legs, but in my spirit. It's a slow thing. Nobody notices it from the outside. You still smile when someone asks how you are. You still say, "I'm doing just fine." And part of you even believes it. But another part, the quiet part, starts asking questions late at night. Who needs you now? That question, it echoes. And if you let it sit too long, it starts answering itself. That was the edge I found myself standing on. Not dramatic, not loud, just a quiet place where life could either keep moving or slowly begin to fold in on itself. And I'll tell you the truth, I didn't know yet which way I was going to go. It happened on a Tuesday. Nothing special about that day, no storm, no phone call, no bad news waiting at the door. Just a plain, ordinary Tuesday, the kind people forget. And maybe that's why I remember it so clearly. I was sitting in that same chair by the window, watching the street like I sometimes do. Not because I'm expecting anything, just because it reminds me the world is still moving. A young mother walked by with her little boy. He was tugging at her hand, asking something over and over. I couldn't hear the words, but I knew the rhythm. Children always ask the same way. Urgent. Curious. Like the answer might disappear if they don't get it fast enough. And that's when it hit me, I wasn't part of anyone's urgent anymore. Not in a sad, dramatic way, just a quiet realization that settled right into my chest. There was a time when everything about me was needed. Meals, advice, comfort, decisions. I was the center of someone else's world. And now, I was a memory people carried, not a place they returned to. I sat there a long while with that thought. You'd think it would break me. But it didn't. It did something else. It made me honest. I stood up slow, steady, like I always do, and walked into the kitchen. Looked around at everything I had kept in order for so many years. Same cabinets. Same dishes. Same careful way of living. And I asked myself something I hadn't dared to ask before if no one needs you. Do you still live like you matter? That question, it changes a person. Because all my life, my purpose had been tied to someone else. My husband, my daughter, my family, good purpose, real purpose, but borrowed in a way. And now there was no one left to borrow it from. So I made a decision right there, standing at that kitchen counter. Not a loud one, not the kind you tell people about, a quiet one. I decided I wasn't done yet, not because someone needed me, but because I was still here. That may not sound like much, but at 90, that's everything. I started small. That same afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in years. I cooked a proper meal. Not something quick. Not something just to get by. I took my time. Chopped vegetables the way my mother taught me. Let the pan heat slowly. Let the smell fill the house. And for the first time in a long while, the house didn't feel empty. It felt lived in. Not because someone else was there, but because I was. The next morning, I went outside. Now, I hadn't stopped going out completely, but I'd gotten careful. You understand what I mean. Short trips. Only what's necessary. That day, I walked a little farther. Nothing dramatic. Just down the street, past where I usually turn back. My legs complained some. That's their job now. But I kept going, because I remembered something I once heard about how the body doesn't just fail all at once. It fades when you stop asking it to keep up. And I wasn't ready to fade. Not quietly. Not without a say. When I came back home, I was tired. But it was a good tired. The kind that reminds you you're still part of your own life. That evening, I sat in my chair again. Same window. Same street. But something had shifted. Not outside, inside. For the first time since my daughter left. I wasn't waiting anymore. And I didn't expect that. Not at all. A week passed, maybe 2. Time moves differently when you stop measuring it by other people. I didn't call her. That was my choice. Not out of pride, no. Pride is a young person's burden. At my age, you learn to put that down. I didn't call because I wanted to understand something first, who I was, without being someone's mother in the active sense. That's a hard thing to admit. People think motherhood ends when children grow up. It doesn't. It just changes shape. And if you're not careful, you spend years holding onto a version of yourself that no longer has a place to stand. I had done that, quietly, without noticing. One morning, I found an old box in the hallway closet. Photographs, letters, little things I had kept without thinking. You don't realize how much of your life fits into a small box until you open it. I sat down on the floor, yes, I still do that, slowly, and started going through them. There she was, at 5 years old, missing her front tooth, holding up a drawing like it was the most important thing in the world. There she was again, 16, standing a little too far from me in the picture. Not cold, just already stepping into her own life. And then one photo stopped me. She must have been about 30. We were standing in the kitchen, this very kitchen, laughing about something I can't remember anymore. But I saw it clear as day, she wasn't a child in that picture. She was a woman. And I was still looking at her like she needed me the same way she used to. That's when it settled in. Not all at once, but enough. I hadn't just been left behind. I had been holding onto a version of her that no longer existed. And that's not her fault. That's just time. I closed that box slowly, sat there a while longer than I needed to. And then I did something I hadn't done since she left. I picked up the phone. Now my hand, it hesitated. Not because I was afraid she wouldn't answer, but because I wanted to get this right. You don't get many chances later in life to say something the way it truly needs to be said. She answered on the 3rd ring. Her voice, it sounded the same. Older, maybe, busier, but still my girl. She said, "Hi, Mama." And for a moment, I almost fell back into old habits. Asking questions, checking on her, making sure everything was in order. But I didn't. I took a breath, slow, steady, and I said something different. I said, I was just thinking about you. No reason. Just wanted you to know that. There was a pause. A real one. Not awkward, not empty, just full. She softened. I could hear it. And then she said something I didn't expect. I've been meaning to call you. Now, I smiled at that. Not because I believed it fully, but because I understood it. Life gets loud. People get busy. Love doesn't always show up on time, but that doesn't mean it's gone. We talked, not long, just enough. And when we hung up, I didn't feel that ache I had been carrying before. Not because everything was fixed, but because something inside me had shifted into its proper place. Here's what I learned, and you listen carefully, because this took me 90 years to understand your children don't leave you. They move forward. And if you love them right, you don't stand behind them calling them back. You stand where you are and let them know they can still see you, whenever they turn around. That's the difference. That's the peace. That night, I sat in my chair again. Same window, same quiet, but it wasn't heavy anymore. It was just mine. And I didn't expect that. Not at all.